Hello, this is the part number 5 of our series of videos about making your first phaser game. I'm following the tutorial of the same name here, this official tutorial from the Phaser website. This tutorial is made by Richard Davey, the author of Phaser, and I'm following this tutorial for showing you how you can do the same things but with Phaser Editor 2D, with a Phaser Editor style that sometimes is different of how you will make the game if you write it by hand. So here in this chapter we are going to create a player using the sprite sheet. If you remember the dude sprite sheet from this one, it is a sprite sheet from the previous chapters. We are going to use this sprite sheet for creating the player and later creating the animations of the player. These animations, and here let's start here for the player. You create a player with a physics system and the game factory. The game factory, the add game factory has the method sprite for creating a sprite with a physics body. We need to create a sprite and not an image because the difference between a sprite and an image is that a sprite supports sprite animations. So we are going to create a sprite. The sprite, it sets the bones and properties and to collide to the world. That the sprite, the player will collide to the world bounds. So it is not going to go out of the screen. And here with the animations manager, this refers to the scene, the current scene, and the animations manager will create the left animation. The look, the parameters are the key of the animation, that is like the name of the animation, the frames it will use, it will generate the frames numbers from the sprite sheet from the frame 0 to the frame 3. For example, here, the left animation will be from the frame 0 to the frame 3. And the same with the turn animation will be only one frame, and the right animation will have 5 frames. I will show you that with the editor. This will be more clear than only talking about it. So first, let's go to the editor and let's create the player object. We have the editor here, the game running here, and Visual Studio Code here. Let's running, okay, with the Webpack development server running. Let's go to the Phaser editor. In the previous chapter, we changed a bit the platforms with a scale for showing how you have to refresh the body. I will to reset that. I do not want to reset the scale here. Maybe the scale. So we change this scale, and he's returning, and I want to turn off the debug of the physics here in the index, debug false. Okay, I like it now better. So let's create our player object. We have here the sprite sheet. Look, the sprite sheet in the blocks because we add it to the set pack. If you remember that, let me see if I can show you it. Okay, in the set pack, we add it as a sprite sheet with the frames here. So we have here now in the blocks of the scene, and we can add the object there. Let's add here an object. By default, when you drag a frame or an image to the scene, it will create an image object. Here is the type. But what we need now is a physics object, a physics a sprite with physics body. So I click here and I select the type. I want to change the type of the object, and I get here arcade image. Maybe you will look it like this. If you zoom in, zoom on, you can zoom in, zoom out on here. I prefer having it like this, an arcade image. Okay, we have now an arcade image. If we look here in the game, we have an object with physics. And as we look here, it is sending the bouncing properties and the collide world bounds properties. So here we come to the physics properties. By the way, we created by default a dynamic body. We need a dynamic body because we are going to change the velocity. It will be collide and will be react with collisions. So I will set here and the bouncing. See, a zero bouncing means it doesn't bounce. But if you set 1, it means it will bounce the same, with the same velocity. It will preserve the same. It is not going to lose velocity when it bounces. But here is 0.2. It will lose a bit of velocity. Let's see here. Let's see here. It's better looking that. Wait. And I will say collide world bounce. Look, it bounces a bit. If I put 1, it bounces the same. It keeps bouncing. If I said 2, it will be crazy. 2. Okay, let's use. So that's it. We have our chapter here with the physics properties. We can look in the code. It created here our player, a dude 0. Now, let's change this. Player. We have our player here and the properties. We set the editor generates all the code. Now, but probably if you make a game like this, you would like to have all the functionalities, all the properties of the player in a class, in a unit. So we are going to create in the phaser editor. What I recommend is creating a prefab of the player. If we create the prefab, we set the properties there in the prefab, and later in other chapters, you will see how this will help us for making the other parts of the game. So for making that a prefab, I can select here, prefab, create prefab with the object. I will name it player prefab. We have it here, right? Player prefab here. What's happening here? Let's save. I see there is an error here. Can I find modular prefab? Let me start again with this. Start it again. Okay, we have it here. Sometimes when you create a new class, a new file with a Webpack development server, you need to restart it again. It is what I did now. So we have our prefab here, the player prefab. It has a dynamic body. It said here the properties, and in the scene we have now we only say the player to the scene. Okay, have the player to the scene. And now the following is making our animations in the player. Look again here. Let's look again here. For creating animations, here in the phaser tutorial, Richard Davey uses the animation the animation manager that you can access here like this dot animes. But in Phaser editor, Phaser has a custom format, a custom pretty similar to this. Let's see, an object. You can create the animations with an object or with a file, a JSON file with the data of the animation, with the description, with the parameters. The same parameters you use here, you can set that in a JSON file and load it in the with the loader into the game and load that file into the game. It is what I'm going to use that here in the editor. With the editor, you can create an animation file. Let's do it here in the assets folder because it is an assets that we are going to load. The new animations file. Have the animations here. It is a JSON file. And let's create our first animation. The left animation is from frame 0, 1, 2, 3. We have the left animation. It is running a lot because it is going too fast. By default, it has a frame rate of 24, but let's use 10 frame rate. Like here, look, frame rate 10 frame rate. And by default, it repeats, look, number of times to repeat the animation. -1 for infinity. So -1 is the default value. Let's create the another animations. Add animation. Add animation. Hey, this mouse. Sometimes this magic mouse is crazy. Add animation. Turn. Let's use 4. And let's add another one. Right. Is going from 5 to 8. That's okay. I want to set that everybody to, let me select everybody here. Frame rate 10. Okay. We have here our animations. Look, the left have the frames. You can understand, I think, a bit more what's about the animations here. And that's all. We have the animations. But let's say I want to apply one animation for you to look it. It is not part of the tutorial here. It explains how you create the face, the physics sprite, and it explains how create frame by frame animation. Explains a bit. I think I explained that here in the animations editor, but now I want to play one animation with a character because we have our character here doing nothing. I will set the player to be available in the whole class scope class. It means it will create here a field. Let me open Visual Studio Code. By the way, the command I use is this one. Is compiler open output file in Visual Studio Code. It is the command I pressed. And we'll say I have the player here is player play. Hey, what about this is not a arcade image? No, I have to set that, sir. Let's type replace type, not an arcade image. It should be an arcade sprite because an image cannot play animations. Okay, I have it here now. Player play. Now we have the method here. Left. It says the player will play the left animation. Let's see that in the game here. Not working. Why? Left animation. Not working. Why? Because we created animation files, but we have to load the animation files in the asset pack. For loading it in the asset pack, you can load the asset pack, click here and import as animation, or you can just click here animations in the files view, and it shows you a button for import the animation in the asset pack, and we have it like that. You don't have to open the asset pack. So we have now the animations in the asset pack, so it should work now. Okay, it is running here. Look, our character is running. Our character is running here. But I want to show you something more. I want to show you something more. I want to make this in the prefab, but in the prefab, let's delete this. I don't want to, because what about if I want another player here? If I add another player here, look, even if I use the prefab, I add another player, it falls down, but one is running animated, but the other one is not animated. So I want to make this in the prefab, but in this way. First, let me delete this. But in this way, in the player prefab, I will create a custom property. Look here. A custom property. The prefab has properties. You can create a user property or custom property of different types. One of the types are animation key property. An animation key property is like a string property, a property of type string, but it shows you a dialog for selecting the name of an animation. So let's say I will create an auto play animation. An animation to play when the object is created. The label auto play animation. The animation to play first. Okay. By default, I will say it is the turn animation. By default, it is not animated. Look here in the code of the prefab, we created the custom animation autoplay animation. And by default, it has the turn value. So what I want to make is, let me open Visual Studio Code. Remember, there is an awake event that is, look here in the scene, all the scenes, always. At the end, it emits the scene awake event. And I want to use that event for warm up, set up our prefab. Scene events once. Once means that it will read that, it will catch, listen for that event only once. Scene awake event, and I will say to awake the prefab. To call this method, I have to create the method here, remember, between the start user code and end user code, because in the other way it will be overridden by the compiler. Awake method. What I'm going to do is to play the value, the animation set in the auto play animation. This is the property I created here as a user property. And now, when you look here, we have here the autoplay animation property, custom property, and here when you go to the level scene, let's look. If you select this player, it has here in the prefab instance section, in the player prefab part, autoplay animation turn. I can change it because it's a prefab. I have to unlock that property and select a new animation, the left animation. And for this guy here, I will use the write animation. Look here, let's see, and that's it. This guy is running to the left and this one is running to the right. If you look in the code, we have the player prefab. Let's use better names here. Player number 1 and player number 2. Now I'm not going to make this class. I don't need it to be in the class. Okay, we have, look here, player number 1, it creates a prefab and add to the scene. And player number 2, it creates an instance of the prefab and adds it to the scene. And at the end of the method, it says that player number 1 autoplay animation will be left, and player number 2 autoplay animation will be right. So after that, it will emit the scene awake method. So the prefab implementation, the prefab will listen to this event and will play the animation set here in this property. I think that's it. We have here, we set the physics to the player and we animated it. It's always a bit different from writing all these. The good things I want to say, a good thing when you make a prefab is just think that maybe you have 2 guys working in your project. One guy is making the prefabs, is making user components, is making a small framework for your game. So the other guy, the other person, the other developer can make the levels without touching the code. You can just drag the prefabs there. You can change the properties, everything made visual. So you can create first all the prefabs, all the logic of the game, encapsulate that logic in prefab user components, and later you can use everything and create your scenes, your levels of your game, just dragging objects and setting the properties. So that's it for all. Follow this channel, like this video, tell me something in the comments, and see you later. See you in the next video. Goodbye.